I might say one thing that occurred just happened to be on VJ night, which was the end of things. And I had been moved back to the fighter training base, and I had a nice soft job, but you always had to have an extra job. And the CO of the base called me in one time. He said, we got to find something for you. He said, somebody's going to ask one of these times, and if you don't have an extra job, you're liable to get a bad one. And I said, well, give me an easy one then. He said, okay, how would you like to be shore patrol officer? I said, God, no, that's the last thing in the world I want to do. He said, you're going to be shore patrol officer. So I went out to the shore patrol department, and it was being run by an old grizzled Navy chief, and they did most of the running of the Navy anyway. And I said to this guy, I said, Chief, yeah, this is not my cup of tea. What are we going to do? I don't want to bother you. How will we handle this? He said, well, I'd rather you didn't bother us because we're running smoothly. But he said, there are times when we need an officer. And I said, when is that? He said, when we're dealing with an officer. He says, they give us more trouble than you can imagine. And I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. You run the shore patrol. I'll be a standby for work with officers. The only problem was, every time they had trouble with an officer, I don't know why, he was always 6'5" and weighed 240. That's the only kind that got drunk and troublesome. Anyway, comes VJ night. And we are having a party like you would not believe. Everybody, man, this was a gigantic blast. And a guy comes and he says, sir, there's a call from you from, oh man, little town right on Mobile Bay. God, I thought I'd never forget it. Anyway, a little town right on Mobile Bay in Alabama. And I'll think of the name of it. He said, your chief is on the phone. So I answered. He said, man, it would be a help if you'd get out here. I got something I don't know what to do with. And I said, well, what do you, is it really that serious? He said, well, these swabbies got into a fight with some Army guys. And he says, this sailor bit the Army man's ear off. And I said, oh, come on now, let's not exaggerate. And he says, I got his ear right here in my hand. So I had to go over to, what the hell is the name of that? What is, now it's a tourist.
A Point Clear?
Well, close to Point Clear. But that's not the name of it.
Foley?
No, this wasn't Foley. This is where I was at the time.
Gulf Breeze?
Well, anyway. Funny, we went to Foley. This when we were down there a couple of years ago. I didn't mean to talk to that Navy guy and scare him, and I wanted to go out and take a look at this old base.
Well, we went that day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, everybody around here wasn't even born when Foley was operating. It's nothing now, just an airstrip and very little stuff. So I finally found some old geezer who'd heard of it, and he said, why don't you try the phone directory? I hadn't even thought of that. It had 2 numbers in there, so I called out there and told him that I'd been both through there as a cadet, and I'd been stationed there in 1945, and I was just interested in what it was like. And this guy says, well, there's not much going on here, but said, if you'd like to come out. He said, what was your rank? And I said, well, when I was there was a captain. I didn't think that he's a Navy guy, And a captain in the Navy is like a full colonel in the Marine Corps. And so he said, "Yes, sir." He says, "You come out. What time would you like to be here, sir? And we'll meet you and show you around what's left here." So I guess he was probably disappointed when he found out that I was something less than that.
What happened with the guy in the ear and the call on DJ?
Oh, well, he went over there, and I went over there, and sure enough, the guy had his ear, and we took him to the hospital, and there was a lot of red tape involved, and
I hope they sewed it instead of just taping it.
yeah, so,
Isn't that awful? Oh my God.
but that happened every weekend. I mean, something like that. Every time the Navy and the Army guys get together, there'd be a fight.
Well, that was part of their fun.
I guess.
Yeah. That's funny.
When did you get involved in judo?
Well, I did that when I was going through flight training, just enough so that I was interested in it, is all. And then when after the war here, I met the guy who was active in judo, and I started helping him and ended up as the instructor for the YMCA. It wasn't judo, it was
Taekwondo?
no, I'll think of it in a minute. It just plain old defense tactics was what it was for people to come into the YMCA and learn self-defense is what it was. So, but I worked with that guy for several years. He was pretty good. Then I got who was our friend from Cincinnati, Bill. The guy, we went up, it was general manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Bill, isn't that awful? Anyway, I got him interested, and he got his black belt up at in Nebraska. So, then the war came, Korean War came along. And I had started off after the war. Man, this could go on all day if I took everything in this.
You just get warmed up.
At least you're not senile and you forgot.
Well, Fairhope, Alabama.
There you go.
Fairhope, Alabama.
Close to Foley.
Yep.
It's still
So, well, I grubbed around in Bill Burgess, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
I came out of service. I had some money, of course, had all this that I hadn't been able to spend. And I went to Chicago, and I really had a good time. I lived like a king, like I'd always wanted to live, but I had a short term of duty. I ran out of money. And I'd had a car, and I didn't have a car, I didn't have any money. So I took a bus to St. Louis. And that's when I finally went to work.
And what did you do then?
Well, I got a job with Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing as a sales trainee. And then I went to a cocktail party one night with John Levitt. And I met this guy who was a competitor of John's who got drunk and hired me.
And that's your entrance into the leather business?
Yeah, only this guy was a marvelous guy, super guy. John, isn't that awful? My memory is getting to a point. Anyway, he was a super guy. This was strictly sole leather, though. And the only way he could hire me was the president of the company in Cincinnati, Ohio, where the tannery was. Said I had to come up there and take, this is when they just really started working these psychological tests. 2-day affair where you went through everything. So I went up to Cincinnati, went into this thing, went for 2 days through all 8 hours a day, finishing these 2 tests. Went home. John, shit. Anyway, he called me 3 or 4 days later. He said, "You want to work for me?" And I said, "Does this test say I'm eligible?" He said, "The boss called me and said you get that guy to work." So when I had 16 states I traveled, and if that I was gone, really gone. And I had started off. I had been in the reserve squadron at Glenview, up in Chicago. So I was in the reserve squadron, fighter squadron here at Lambert Field, but I ended up I was never here. So I resigned from the reserves, went from the active to inactive reserves. That squadron was the first Marine fighter squadron reactivated and called away to the Korean War. They were the first one to be pulled back into active duty, and boom, they were over there. Still flying Corsairs, that's all they had. After all those years, that's what they were flying. Just blowing them out of the air. By this time, anti-aircraft work had become so sophisticated, they were just blowing those Corsairs out of the air like you wouldn't believe.
Well, how do you feel about that? That you had resigned active duty or being active at that same time? Were you kind of glad that you didn't have to?
Well, I tell you, it was a mixed feeling. I'll guarantee you. In one respect, I felt like I'm kind of left out, and in another respect, and what I've heard from a lot of those guys, I was very glad I wasn't there. So, and and then of course that I worked for this guy for a couple of years, maybe not even that long, and the two of us, we talked about, we began to see the terrible inroads being made into the business by neolite and other things that were synthetic materials for soling, and everything we were selling was genuine leather. See? But that sort of stuff just ruined the leather soling business. What?
The cost of it?
Well, it was so much cheaper than regular leather, for one thing.
What was the name of that company? Was there
Which company?
the first company that you started in the leather business?
American Oak Leather Company.
American Oak.
Mm-hmm. Cincinnati, Ohio.
AOL.
And I went up there, that called me up there, and I worked for 6 months in the tannery. And there isn't anything more revolting than working in a tannery. Matter of fact, what's that?
Maybe you're rendering.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, they would see, I was up there 6 months, about every 2 months, they'd fly me home for a weekend. And I would shower about 3 times, go out, get on the plane, and everybody get up and move to the other side of the aisle. Oh.
So that kind of gives us a clue, doesn't it? Oh, boy.
Well, then,
That black stuff on the broken tongue.
this stuff,
That bums me out.
it's Thousand Island dressing.
You have a love, I guess, for lack of a better word, of music and many, many different kinds of music. Where did that start? What are some of your earliest memories of bands that you were attracted to or had an opportunity to see?
Oh, gosh. Well, I grew up in the big band swing era because I just got myself a new CD of Benny Goodman's concert at Madison Square Garden, 1938. Now, there I am. I'm just in college. I'm 18 years old. And that was stuff that was the love of my life. You could hitchhike, hop a freight train anyway to get to Indianapolis, to go to, I forget the name of the theater, but these bands would be playing there every week, a different one. One right after another for like a quarter. That's all it took to get in the theater. And you'd see a big name band, one right after another. Jim Iskey, the guy that got killed, I was telling you about. His last year, he was had the job of hiring a band for the junior senior prom. And I'm going to screw this up if I can't remember the names. Anyway, he went up to Indianapolis to audition some outfits, and he came back and he said, I'm going to get killed. I said, why? He said, I didn't hire a band that's well known. Now I'm going to, isn't that awful?
Harry James.
No.
A long time ago, and I can't remember now.
He played the clarinet, and oh, isn't that? I'm sorry I even started.
No, well known. Did he have a brother that also was?
No, it wasn't the Dorsey.
Oh, I was thinking.
It was anyway, I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, we used to see one big band after another. My two, of course, favorites were Goodman and who was in the mood? No. Glenn Miller. Miller, Goodman. One of my favorites. A lot of people didn't know quite so well, but he was solid. Was Glenn Gray. This Casa Loma Orchestra was that a great band, super band. The Dorseys. And then when the guys that all broke away from Goodman, Harry James had his own band. Gene Krupa had his own band. Lionel Hampton had his own band. Then all of the black bands. What's that? Yeah.
Did you ever play music?
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't?
No, I took guitar lessons from Mel Bay Music out here in Kirkwood, and Mel called me in one time and he says, Frank, he said, you know, you really enjoy music so much. He said, it's a shame. He said, but you're wasting your time and mine. He said, why don't you listen to music and enjoy it the best you can? And that's right. So I took my guitar home, put it in the closet. Several years later, who gets out and starts playing the guitar?
I still got that.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
You took lessons from Mel himself.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you
Oh, the Iskey said, I got a guy that nobody ever heard of. But he said, once you heard of him, I'll be safe. His name was Les Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Band of renown.
Nobody heard of. Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, even though you couldn't play, you certainly did a great thing in instilling a love of music in us.
Well,
I don't know anybody that likes it more than he does, do you?
So,
that was another thing. I almost, if I ever got close to being court-martialed, it's when I ran a Jeep over Slim's record collection.
Oh, my God.
Because he was about his records like I was.
Oh, boy.
Only I ran over with a Jeep.
Oh,
on purpose?
Of course not.
Oh, was he ready to kill you?
Oh, he was so
What
mad.
was the circumstance behind that?
How did you have to do that? Were you drunk?
Yes.
Oh, I figured that.
What else?
I figured it had to be the reason.
Well, that is
Ooh, Dale. Okay.
that is something else. We did, being young and foolish, drink an awful lot.
Well,
It was
You're up to do when you're young and foolish.
it was a question of
You think you're cool.
proving that you could do it
Sure, you're
to
cool.
everybody else.
Sure. It was
And some of the funniest things happened that I wouldn't believe. And there were some guys, I mean higher ranking officers, who were really drunkards. We used to spend a lot of time singing because we loved to sing. And I remember one night standing out on a sandy beach, 6 or 8 of us standing there together with our arms around each other, singing away. And this bum staggers up and tries to get into the circle. We kept pushing him away. As it turned out, he was the island commander, a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel. And this about the time the guard walked by with his on sentry duty, had his rifle with him, and the colonel says to him, "Stop, sentry." He says, "Come here a minute." Sentry comes over, the colonel says, "Shoot that man." Shoot that man.
That's terrible.